2017 is the year of disaster for North America, and there's still more than a month to go. Mexico. Back-to-back earthquakes kill more than 400. Magnitudes up to 8.1. One striking near the capital. In the United States, Hurricane Harvey slams Houston with record rains and flooding. Hurricane Irma slams Florida. And Category 5 Hurricane Maria devastates Puerto Rico. Here in the West, fast-moving fires strike Northern California, killing 42. As Washington and Oregon are also hit with major fires, covering the states in smoke. 15 disasters hit the United States alone, costing $1 billion or more. Are you ready for the next one? And how will we bounce back? Tonight, a King 5 special presentation, Emergency, Coping with Disaster.
Are you prepared to be on your own in a disaster for weeks, maybe even a month? I'm Glenn Farley.
I'm Lori Matsukawa. We want to focus on how we can build stronger communities today, capable of riding out a disaster, so that recovery is easier once the emergency is over.
Now, the new Acosta School in Westport can save people from a tsunami. It is a vertical evacuation structure, the first of its kind in North America. But what does it take to move an entire village? Could anything be more beautiful than the Washington coast on a nice fall day? There are beaches, forests, and those rocky sentinels in the surf. It's a tourism destination. And some are lucky enough to look upon it every day, here where the Quileute River flows into the Pacific Ocean. You're going to give this up?
Yeah, gladly.
It's a view to die for, and Mark Jacobson says that's the problem.
I think it would look like terror coming.
Jacobson is talking about a tsunami generated by an earthquake right off our own coast or triggered by earthquakes in Alaska or from across the ocean. And the tsunami, which killed 15,000 people in Japan just 6 years ago, connects back to a former colleague.
I had a person that was a principal that worked for me that was there and lost kids in it. I don't want to lose a kid or a staff member.
Would you start reading for us, please?
Jacobson is superintendent of the Quileute Tribal School in La Push. The school, like the lower village itself, sitting only 10 to 25 feet above sea level. A tsunami could reach 100. The bus is always parked here, ready to evacuate in the 20 minutes or so before the first wave would be expected to arrive. If the roads are blocked, students and staff would have to evacuate on foot.
We also try to teach the kids don't count on an adult, because if it's a major earthquake and our buildings collapse or we've got injured employees, kids need to know what to do.
The boy, Roger.
We visited the school on Halloween. Yet neither the holiday nor the fictional Twilight books and movies set in this part of the state have anything on the geological reality that is putting the real scare into the people who live here. The tribe is taking action, and it's been acting for decades.
One of these days it could happen here, but just like what happened in Japan. You know, that just came just quick, just like that.
Russ Woodruff is a tribal elder. And beginning about 3 decades ago, as the scientific picture began to emerge on the risks from a magnitude 9 earthquake, he and others pushed to get the Quileutes ready. They designed and practiced evacuation drills, the tribe installing one of the first warning sirens on the coast. But unlike most of us, the Quileute people were here before the last earthquake and tsunami in the year 1700, and the one before that, and before that.
I think some of the old legends of some of the old people was talking about something about a big wave came in.
What you see here may look like a logging operation, and it is, but this means survival for the Quileute tribe because they are going to move La Push up onto higher ground to prepare for the next earthquake and tsunami.
There's viable alternatives to just saying we're in danger.
Larry Burtness works for the tribe as a planner and grant writer. 5 years ago, this second growth forest was transferred by Congress from the Olympic National Park back to the Quileute tribe. Just weeks ago, contractors began cutting trees and pushing a road into a 285-acre area more than 250 feet above sea level. This is where the school will move to. Superintendent Jacobson's view will look out over trees.
Ultimately, the same road track will be the access road to the school. And on the right will be athletic fields, baseball fields, and a football-sized field.
On the school campus, this is called the Tribal Services Campus, and this campus area would focus all of the government facilities.
Susan Devine is a consultant for Parametrics in Seattle. This engineering, planning, and environmental services company is developing the plan to move to higher ground. Eventually, the entire lower village could move up here.
I grew up in the house just right at the mouth of the river.
Naomi Jacobson is now vice chair of the Tribal Council.
If we were to not take this kind of action, we're putting at risk the future of our tribe.
There is always awareness of the past.
We hear stories now about canoes being in trees and, people having to run to higher ground, and those same types of planning that we're doing right now.
Doing this move will take money, and there's not a lot of money in this economy, based mostly on fishing and tourism. The tribe won a commitment from the Bureau of Indian Affairs last year to fund construction of a 60,000 square foot school. The final cost won't be known for several months until the design phase is complete. It's cost just under $1.1 million so far to plan, clear, and begin the design work, funded with both federal and state money. And the BIA funding may not cover everything, and that's just the school.
We will be launching a capital campaign when we're ready to do so. Right now, we're laying the groundwork for a capital campaign so that people can contribute.
So what could happen to the village of La Push as we know it? Well, one vision is this could be more focused on tourism with the inclusion of vertical evacuation structures, strong concrete buildings where people could run in case of a tsunami.
It's definitely the kind of thing that all the coastal communities are having to deal with, tribal and otherwise.
Think of this as a race with no known finish line. Construction on the new school could begin as soon as next spring. 2 years after that, the Elder Center, then the tribal government offices. Yet the next quake-driven tsunami may not hit for another century or more, or it might strike next week. What is the price for getting it wrong?
Those moms dropping their kids off at school every day, knowing that we better get our act together and we better have a place to go.
You wonder when it's going to come here. And I think that we just got to stay positive that we need to get this going and get it up before it does happen.
Just weeks ago, the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Washington released detailed scientific animations of 50 different ways that coastal quake could play out.
The areas where the colors light up show the pent-up energy being released. The level of shaking is expected to be pretty bad, but the level of severity depends on where the earthquake starts.
We need roads for almost everything, to get to the store or for help to get to you. Bridges are a major area of concern, and the state, counties, and cities have been working through their huge bridge inventory to make them more quake resistant.
Jenna Hanchard now on Pierce County's efforts to keep us moving.
Bruce Wagner with Pierce County Public Works hopes he'll never have to use what's inside of this trailer.
Your emergency preparedness needs to be distinct and ready to go at any given time.
Wagner says there are 4 of these stock trailers spread out across the county so that public works crews can quickly coordinate traffic and roadways.
Because once the disruption occurs and people start scrambling to their priorities, I need to take care of my home and my family, panic can ensue.
Wagner has tapped roads such as 112th Street to serve as a surrogate to the highway system if State Route 512 is taken out. The command center in Frederickson would serve as home base during an emergency.
So we deploy staff into 28 emergency response zones that we've identified in the county and have them systematically patrol each road.
Along with the road crews, bridge engineers will be out in pairs.
On topside like this, the type of things that we'll be looking for is the alignment of, for example, the bridge rails.
Craig Shaner says these types of bridges, like the Nisqually Creek Bridge, that have been around since the late 1930s, may not hold up during a major earthquake, but the majority of county bridges aren't like this. Shaner says most of the Pierce County bridges were built in the 1970s and could keep it together in an earthquake.
Yeah, you might have some settlement of one or both of the foundations or some tipping, something like that. But typically, single-span bridges like this fare fairly well.
Public Works says they've got the knowledge, the plans, and the resources.
Make sure I put these back in the right slot.
But they're hoping they won't have to use them anytime soon.
What do you do when help isn't coming?
Ladies and gentlemen, you are on your own. Ooh, okay. So what do we do, Chief? So let's talk about that.
And the long list of work facing the state to get ready for recovery.
Here in Washington, you could find yourself isolated after an earthquake, cut off from rescuers. But what if your rescuer was a neighbor?
In Clallam County, they call these places micro islands. That's why people need to be self-sufficient, not for 14 days, but for 30 days.
The county is becoming a model for how people can survive and recover together as communities.
How far do we go to get ready? Jim Buck is the engine propelling a volunteer army.
So we went through an entire study process. Took us about 5 months to figure out how we were going to feed 300 people without having to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
This is Joyce. Joyce is not a person, it's a place. A tiny town about 20 miles west of Port Angeles.
We have a stock of MREs for short-term feeding. We have enough food for 100 people for 3 weeks for long-term feeding. We're working on our sanitation plan.
His background as an Army officer comes through.
We have sleeping bags for 100 people right now. We would like to triple that.
There are foldable shovels and diapers, stoves and fire extinguishers, stacks of cots and a wheelchair. Even the container storing it is chained down against shaking. For Buck, the realization of the state's vulnerability to seismic forces happened on the last day of February 2001, when as a Republican state legislator, he wrote out the 6.8 Nisqually earthquake inside the Capitol building, which was significantly damaged.
We were going up and down this much. I thought earthquakes went like this. I was totally unprepared for having to try to stand on a trampoline that was the Capitol, the 4th floor of the Capitol building.
3 years later, the Indian Ocean tsunami killed 250,000 people in multiple countries. Then in 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated much of New Orleans. He feels both citizens and their government need to step up.
It's going to take the realization that a lot of people are going to die in this thing. And these people are going to be held responsible when it happens.
Joyce is in Clallam County, running along much of the north coast and part of the west coast of the Olympic Peninsula. And as I spent my day there, I kept hearing about another place.
In Puerto Rico.
So Puerto Rico, if you look at the length of the county, it's the same size as Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is about 40 miles wide. We're around 20 miles wide in this area here.
Blaine Zecchinelli is a volunteer emergency planner for Clallam County Fire District 3, which includes Sequim. Puerto Rico fell victim to Hurricane Maria, not an earthquake. But whether your home is blown apart or shaken apart, the aftermath is still devastating. Now, how do you deal with it?
So each of these dots are red where our bridges are and where we expect those bridges to fail. So for example, these 3 dots here are the Dungeness River bridges. And when those fail, our ability to move from one area to the other is now eliminated.
And the result is a series of micro-islands. Even in the county seat of Port Angeles, deep ravines threaten to cut the city in half and the county into sections. Landslides a big worry. So this is all ready to go that way. And the courthouse is right over there.
Yeah.
Penny Linterman is the county's emergency management program coordinator. And while some hazards are obvious, others are not. Take Lincoln Avenue that runs in front of the courthouse. Its vulnerability is literally paved over. What most people don't realize is that this road is built on an old wooden railroad trestle with dirt dumped around it long ago.
When they were building the gas station, a backhoe was working and backed up, and the pavement gave way and the backhoe went partially into the hole, which indicates that the trestle's still there. There's still void underneath.
From west to east, Clallam County is setting up ways to deal with disaster in pieces.
Wherever you're at. You're not going anywhere.
Dan Orr is the assistant fire chief for Clallam District 3. He's got 8 firefighters on duty at any given time to cover 147 square miles and 33,000 people.
You're not going to see the bright red shiny fire truck show up in your driveway. You're not. You're not going to see a police officer. You're not going to see an ambulance. You're not going to see anybody. Ladies and gentlemen, you are on your own. Ooh, okay. So what do we do, Chief? So let's talk about that, right? 30 days of food, 30 days of water, 30 days of medicine, 30 days. I need you to be self-prepared for 30 days.
Aftershocks are an issue.
In Clallam County, they call this camping in your house.
The first 24, 48 hours are significant for helping rescue, but then we're at the point of how do we live within this, and how do we manage to live within this in a way that we can stay somewhat joyful.
Judy Harvey volunteers to teach people what to do, what to buy, and how to survive.
You can use blankets, you can use any kind of a ability to make a place in your home where you can have a warmer section to crawl into at night, because the heating is going to be an issue. So the whole point of a small section where it's warm and dry is kind of critical.
And that's the foundation of a micro island. They've defined 20 of them to survive as communities until even temporary bridges can be built to start hooking everything back up.
I would say that this is one of our more well-developed neighborhoods in the Squim area.
Penny Linterman has been working and organizing people who live on this plain going out to the Dungeness Spit and Lighthouse. Some of this area is vulnerable to a tsunami.
Alluvial plain.
Okay. Much of the soil will liquefy and become unstable from shaking.
People want to know what the truth is. Where's my house? Where's my house in relationship to the tsunami zone? Where's my house in relationship to liquefaction?
2 years ago, we had Joyce Days in August. We had some very skeptical people. Last year, we had Joyce Days in August, and there wasn't any skepticism this time. So we're making some progress.
Clallam County is just one example of resilience. Resilience meaning we're not only better equipped to ride out a disaster, but to bounce back faster too.
Now, Governor Jay Inslee asked a cabinet of experts to work on resilience, and their answers show Washington has a lot of work to do.
But I know what we come today is not the end of this rodeo. We got a lot of work to do.
This meeting is a wake-up call. Washington State is the second most vulnerable to earthquakes, but last on the West Coast in our ability to withstand them. Take older hospitals.
California has a much more stringent standard for existing facilities and retrofit of those.
California is ahead because it has endured more frequent earthquakes.
California really started off after the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. So over 230 schools collapsed.
But none so devastating as what Washington faces far less often.
So we're lacking behind California and Oregon, again, who have modeled their whole state for potential tsunami hazard. So how far would a tsunami wave travel inland?
In Washington, only 50% of the state's coastal waterways map for tsunamis. Only 5 of the state's 39 counties has had a school seismic assessment.
We have a current ask in the capital budget for $1.2 million to get started looking at some of the highest risk school facilities.
It is imperative to share this information with our citizens. And I'm intent that we do that, even if some people don't think this is important. I think it's really important.
What does home look like after a disaster? Next, how people who lost everything to the Japan earthquake and tsunami are returning with a new purpose.
It's been 6 years since the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami devastated northeastern Japan, killing some 16,000 people. On top of that, radiation release from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant forced 164,000 people to evacuate.
The government began allowing people to move back to affected areas in the summer of last year. We visited Fukushima Prefecture last month to see what recovery looks like. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami destroyed coastal towns, primarily in Miyagi, Iwate, and Fukushima prefectures. When the tsunami swept through this area, it actually came up to the top of that house over there, wiping out the entire village. And so while the people are redeveloping the port out here by the coastline, they will never build houses here again. Fukushima Prefecture suffered a third blow, radioactive contamination after explosions at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. 164,000 residents in a 12.5-mile radius of the plant were evacuated. Some 57,000 are still displaced. Some villages, like Okuma, remain ghost towns, still too contaminated for habitation. A major part of Fukushima's recovery? Money, and a lot of it. The Japanese government and TEPCO, which owns the Daiichi plant, paid to scrape up the contaminated soil and store it temporarily in thick plastic bags dotting the countryside. In 10 years, the federal government will have spent $286 billion, a third of its budget, to rehabilitate the land, rebuild ports and roads, and make citizens whole. Last summer, the government began lifting evacuation orders, encouraging people to move back. But will they? Akihiro Yoshikawa quit his job at the Daiichi nuclear plant to become a tour guide and evacuee advocate. He takes visitors to the small shopping center in Namie town. It has a laundromat, restaurant, gift shop. You can sample local fish and snacks. He takes visitors to the fall festival. There's music and dancing and delicious food. But the sad fact is, Namie used to have 20,000 residents. It now has 200. Most of the people coming back are old, Yoshikawa admits. They're not coming here to live. They're coming here to die. But like the samurai of old, other people in Fukushima are fighting back. The Soma no Mo Oi is a 1,000-year-old celebration of samurai strength and determination held each summer in Odaka. Many here see it as an anchor for a new tourist industry. Tomoyuki Wada quit his job as a project engineer and now works at Odaka Workers Base, a sort of chamber of commerce. Since the evacuation order in Odaka was lifted in July of last year, he's helped open 80 new businesses. There used to be 4 times as many before the disaster. It's a chicken and egg situation, he explains. You need families in town to attract businesses, and you need businesses in town to attract families. Here's what the streets look like on a typical Saturday morning. Of the 12,000 people who used to live in Odaka, only a fifth have moved back.
That's what I did say, hard.
But Karen Taira isn't discouraged. She quit her marketing job in Tokyo and opened a bed and breakfast in Odaka. The Lantern House is listed on TripAdvisor and Airbnb. Why? She believes visitors will want to enjoy the beauty of the countryside, experience the traditions, and yes, see the recovery for themselves.
So I think it will be very attractive and it will be very interesting, and it definitely worth visiting here for everybody in the world.
For Shinichi Chiba, the disaster gave him a chance to reevaluate what was important. His scenic hometown of Matsushima. How happy he was selling a buttery sponge cake called Castella. The recipe's been in his family for 5 generations. And creating a cafe culture for visitors and locals alike. Yes, he says he will keep the bakery on the 2nd floor above any future tsunamis. And he told a recent TEDx audience, this makes him happy.
I didn't want to drive a fancy car, nor did I want to become famous. Instead of what I wanted to have or whom I wanted to be, I thought of what life I wanted to live.
Above all, the people of the Tohoku region say to always have hope. They say people can and do come back from disasters.
What advice do you have for the people of Seattle?
Never give up.
What is apparent is that the disaster changed people's priorities. Many told us they were recommitted to creating community and protecting the environment, and that returning to their hometown, Furusato, is more than nostalgia. It is reconnecting to life itself.
And we'll be right back.
The big takeaway is that we can all do more to be prepared for the next natural disaster and the hard work that comes afterward.
But if we start thinking about these things now, we can begin recovering more quickly.
If you'd like to see any of these stories, including our complete coverage with months of stories, head to king5.com/disaster.
Thanks for joining us.